In this video, we're going to look at everything you need to know to counter Zed. So first off, what does Zed do? Zed is an assassin. He's good at taking out squishy high value targets. He's also strong in the side lane due to his dueling potential, and he's a strong snowballer due to his high bonus AD ratios. Honing in on that, Zed's strengths are that he has high mobility, makes him hard to pin down and connect skill shots onto. His lack of mana means he can use his abilities to push waves and look to roam. His ult provides massive single target burst as it functions as a damage amplifier. Now for his weaknesses. His kit only offers damage, so he's really underwhelming when behind. He's vulnerable to CC, particularly point and click, and his ultimate can be completely negated by stasis effects. If you're interested in learning more about Zed or any other champion, then head on over to the Mobalytics website where you can see everything you need to know, including builds, combos, pro builds, tips and more. We're going to dive in specifically how to counter Zed, but first here's an overview of the major tips that we'll be breaking down further in this video. First is to dodge his Q harassing lane or stand behind minions, invest in Zhonya's or stopwatch, lock him down with hard crowd control so he can be bursted, build early armor to negate his lethality, and respect his shadows. If you're going into a game against a Zed, those are solid bases to remember and it will help you be successful. It's always good to think about when a champion is strongest or weakest. Zed is strongest in early mid-game fights where he can isolate targets and kill them quickly. To counter this, we want to make sure we're aware of where he is and try to move with your teammates. Zed will struggle when you have backup. Zed falls off late game when you've been able to invest more into defensive items. We can counter him this way, dragging the game out longer and getting items like Zhonya's or Guardian Angel a bit earlier than we normally would. Handling Zed's early game is important, as if he starts strong it's very easy for him to snowball into the later stages. When you're facing up against him in lane, look to abuse his range. Zed is quite weak at level 1 and 2 since he's melee and doesn't have access to all of his basic abilities. You can abuse his range to zone him away from the wave and land significant harass. Be cautious not to overextend too much though, or you open yourself up to all-ins and ganks. Play around his shadow cooldown and stand behind minions. After level 3 he can poke an all-in much easier by using his shadow to throw abilities or gap close, so basically, definitely don't do what this Vlad does. Whenever he uses his Q, if it hits a minion first, it'll deal reduced damage and barely tickle, so look to use this to mitigate his harass like this instead, and keep minions between you and Zed. Maintaining distance is key. Try and have an understanding of the range of Zed's W and stay beyond it. If he can't land his E onto you for the slow, then he'll have a harder time connecting the shurikens afterwards. Zed's W has a 20-second cooldown. Once it's been used, he will be extremely vulnerable to ganks or poke, so make sure to push your advantage after he's expended it. Counter his ultimate before and during. His ultimate is where most of his threat comes from, so let's talk about countering that properly. Beforehand, make sure to ward at least one side of mid to avoid being ganked or stop him surprise ulting you. Be careful not to use your own key abilities like crowd control, as that will give him a clear indication to jump in. If Victor didn't have his W here, he would be in a lot more trouble and wouldn't be able to force Zed to move away. During his ultimate as well, almost all of his damage also comes from his Q. Look to dodge or flash those shurikens and it will massively reduce the damage you take. Even though it might be tempting, do not flash during the ultimate animation. Wait for him to land and then flash his Q. This is the perfect example of outplaying Zed. Kha'Zix uses E to jump away after Zed has landed to build space and then flashes the Q shurikens to avoid the damage, which lets him survive the pop of his ult. Zed's mid game is where he becomes super threatening, having his shurikens maxed and ult available, and typically having a powerful mythic item completed makes him extremely bursty. When you're dealing with Zed in the mid game, watch for flanks. At this point of the game, Zed has completed 1 to 2 lethality items and can devastate your backline if unchecked. He's most likely going to come from the side and not directly at you, so make sure you're prepared. Be very careful in side lanes. Going into a side lane when you're against Zed is extremely risky as a carry. Even if you think you're far away, he can peer over a wall or use his W shadow to get closer before ulting and bursting you down. Towers won't always save you either. CC and burst. Finding an opportunity to land CC on Zed can be tricky but is devastating for him. Make sure you have some cooldowns available to lock him down and look to burst him with numbers to take him down before it expires. Zed players will often look to use their ultimate to dodge abilities, as it gives him a brief window where he is untargetable. In the late game, Zed starts to lose effectiveness, but he's still capable of carrying games if you don't respect him. To handle him in the late game, you need to care for his split push. In the late game, Zed is a powerful duelist that can cause issues in the side lane. This is compounded by the fact that with neutral objectives like Baron, Dragonstone and Elder Dragon up, he can force his opponents to respond to him in the side lane and potentially forfeit those objectives. you basically have two options. You can force fights across the map and make him come to help his team so he has to stop pushing, or you can have someone who can match him and keep him at bay. Like Shen is the ideal, who can also join his teammates. You need to protect your important carries. At this point of the game, Zed is starting to lose relevance and late game carries are becoming bigger threats in team fights. Make sure you protect the important carries and save abilities for when he jumps in. Luli here can ult an ally and knock up Zed, but Quinn also saves blind so he can't deal as much damage. He is way more fragile now, but he still does a lot of damage. Itemization as your backup. You can't always avoid these things, so having items to save yourself is key. Make sure to use it after Zed has used his ultimate for the pop damage normally. This is the perfect example where not only does Zoe hold it for a little until Zed ults, but they Zhonya's dodge the Q shurikens from Zed, meaning that he does no damage and they can turn for the kill. Zed loves to build lethality. This provides flat armor penetration, which is extremely devastating against low armor targets. Even one armor item can reduce his damage by quite a lot. Guardian Angel, Zhonya's Hourglass, or a range of tank items are great tools to increase your survivability. The best item counter to Zed is stasis effects. These can be used to avoid a huge amount of damage from his ultimate, including the pop at the end. Zhonya's is ideal, but stopwatch is a good option and can be built into GA or Stoneplate. Quick tip for timing your stasis, it lasts 2.5 seconds and Zed's ultimate pops after 3 seconds. Make sure to enter Zhonya's before Zed appears to avoid the application, or half a second after he appears to avoid the pop. I've already talked about the strength of the armor from GA, but the effect is great against Zed as well. Zed is very cooldown based, heavily relying on his ultimate and W to dispatch targets. GA lets you absorb his cooldowns and damage and then revive to fight back. If you're playing a support or tank and struggling to keep your carries alive, building a Locket of the Iron Solari is a great tool to give a powerful shield to help survive Zed's burst. That wraps everything up for a Zed counter video. If you enjoyed this video, then you can find more counter videos on our website or in the playlist link below, and be sure to subscribe to be alerted for when we cover a new champion. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you again.